Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Meepleville Meets. Today, we have the designer of the number one game on Board Game Geek, and it's held that title for quite a while. Also, the designer of the new upcoming game that is the number one most funded game on Kickstarter. We'll tell you about what that is and that title a little bit later. But please welcome to Meepleville Meets, Isaac Childress. Hello, Isaac.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, so Gloomhaven is the number one game on Board Game Geek and has been for a while. Congratulations on the tremendous success of that. That is so great to see somebody become so successful in the board gaming world like that. And you've really, just made a splash with that game. You've touched so many people with it. So it's really, really good. But we'd like to find out a little bit more about you. So I understand I should actually be calling you Doctor. Is that correct?
If you want to, I do have a PhD in physics. But generally you only call like medical doctors. So.
True. But I'm just, that's quite fascinating. So I'd like to find out what exactly you have a PhD in physics. So as far as your schooling and, for lack of a better term, professional training, you know what I mean, with that schooling, what were you or what did you intend to be?
That's a good question. I don't know. I never had like a clear career path. Like it was just like I really liked physics. So I kind of like fell in love with physics in high school. So I decided to major in that when I went off to college, and then decided to get a graduate degree after that because I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And in order to like work in the physics field, you really need a PhD. So I did that. But by the time I was done with that, I was kind of tired of it. My love of it had waned a bit, and so that's when I went into board gaming.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I was always interested in like alternate energy technology. So what I really wanted to do, I guess, was sort of apply a physics background to like solar cell technology or something like that. To just try and help with the world energy crisis. But
that's very admirable. Very good. Yeah, because we could definitely use that help. But now, as far as physics is concerned, I understand it's like the core, right, to sort of everything can be explained by physics, as they say, right?
To a certain extent. There's certainly things that physicists still don't know and are still working on, but yeah.
Okay, so what is it about physics in particular, and maybe if you can just maybe give like a little explanation to the audience, but what is it about physics that drove you so much, and also did you sort of have that passion for it as you were growing up?
I think so. I didn't quite know or how to like put my finger on it, right? But I've always been really interested in math. And sort of like practical application of math and like practical application of like problem solving and stuff like that. So I had all these interests. I was really into like chess in like elementary school and just like all that sort of like like deep thinky stuff. And so when I encountered physics in high school, I was like, oh, well, this is like the perfect application of like everything that I love. It's sort of using math to solve like real world problems, and with all this sort of extra like problem solving elements to it, of trying to figure out like the proper ways to do things. And it just like appealed to all my different interests.
Okay. And so when you were in school, did you ever like after you got your advanced degree, your PhD, did you go into teaching at all, or what did you do with it immediately following receiving your doctorate?
I taught a bit during my graduate program, like my first couple of years before I became a research assistant. But no, like I pretty much went directly from graduating with the PhD to then immediately starting to work on Gloomhaven full time. And so I never really had a job in between those two things.
Okay, so then I'm interested to know. So that's kind of like a good transition, a good segue. But when you said you immediately sort of went into working on Gloomhaven from, after receiving your advanced degree,
Yeah.
what was the impetus for that? Or was it you perhaps maybe finding a way to incorporate your love for gaming and your love for physics and somehow, some way combining the two?
Um, I don't know. I'm not sure there was a whole lot of physics involved at that point. It was just previous to working on Gloomhaven, I had published a game, Forge War, which was the first game that I designed and published, and that I had worked on during my physics PhD program. So at that point, I was kind of like tired of working on physics, and discovered this board game hobby and really got into it, and started designing and publishing my own games. And so I was sort of like just a hobby, right? Like I never expected to really make much money doing it. But then the original Kickstarter for Forge War ended up like doing a much better than I expected it to. And so yeah, around the time that I graduated was when I was fulfilling that project, sending it to backers, and I just decided, well, maybe I'm better at this than I thought. Like maybe I could make this, a full time job, and so I decided to, now that I was done with my PhD, to just basically like dedicate a year to it, to just designing and publishing games and seeing what happened with that, and if it didn't quite work out, if I wasn't making enough money doing that, then to sort of go into a physics career.
Okay, well, that's interesting because you had to make that decision. You said you're sort of giving yourself, for lack of a better term, maybe a sabbatical for a little while, right, to try out game designing. But I've talked to other designers about that as well, and I'd like to know, because there are a lot of future designers out there, a lot of people looking to get games. What are maybe some of the conversations you may have had with your wife,
Sure.
or maybe even with yourself, about this sabbatical transition? Was there like time limits, periods? Like, what were some of the conversations you had with her and yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, like, I will say that I was very lucky to like be in that position to have a supportive wife, who was working a real full-time job, and we didn't have any kids, so there weren't like a lot of expenses, so we could afford to do that, which was not a lot of people are in that position, so I feel very lucky to be in that position. Um but yeah, like, what were those conversations like? It was just, I'm a very like practical, grounded person, right? So it's like, and my wife trusts me because of that, so I approach her and I say, I want to try this out, like I think there's a real chance that it could go somewhere, and if it doesn't, I've got a PhD, I can fall back on having a real job, quote unquote, if it doesn't work out. But I think this is the right time to do this, and I think it could go somewhere. And so she just trusted me that yeah, like if I said it could go somewhere, then there's a good chance of that. So she you know let me do it, for lack of a
Right.
better word.
No, I mean, it's always great, because I know, because I have a wonderful wife. Actually, this coming week, it'll be our 25th anniversary, but we've been together for like 32 years. So I know how important it is to have that good support and good, solid partner or base behind you in life in general. So so you did Forge War, you said it was your first game. But what was the initial spark before you started your journey onto Gloomhaven? Like, what was, do you remember the first moment you had that you said, "Hey, I'd like to try to make this game"?
So it was after I had finished designing Forge War. I sort of sat down and started designing other games. And I've always been really interested in dungeon crawls, just like thematically. I grew up playing D&D, and just have a real love for fantasy, Lord of the Rings, and all that sort of stuff. And so I think at the time, like I was playing Descent, and I think also around that time I also tried out Mice and Mystics. Just these fairly simple dungeon crawl games that are just about like rolling dice and sort of having a good time running around, beating up monsters. And I really like fell in love with that, and I wanted to sort of make a game in that sort of same vein, but more catered to my tastes, which are sort of like less randomness, like more more planning, more like involved thought processes. And so it was actually, yeah, I don't know, it was about like maybe 6 months before I um, graduated. I started working on this other game that was kind of a dungeon crawl, but you had like squads of people, and there was like no randomness in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it became like very like mathy in order to like make it interesting. Because like if there's no randomness in a game and you can just like predict what's going to happen each round, then that's not very exciting. So I sort of obfuscated it with like just a lot of extra rules and extra math, and it was a mess. I think there was like some interesting things like in the core of it, but it didn't quite work out. But then once I graduated, I sort of, I don't know, sat down again and tried to work on it again and sort of rework some things, and sort of came up with that 2 card system that everyone really loves in Gloomhaven, and then it kind of just like
Yes.
took off from there.
Oh, very good. So,
Once
so let
I
me just ask you real quick, because you did mention about mathy, and I know I've been to different designer panels and try to make games myself. I think any board gamer has, right? But a lot of the discussion does come down to math. So, as far as like actual computations and algorithms or any of these kind of mathy sort of things in the development of a game, how much of it is actually intertwined into Gloomhaven, or how much did you have to do that in the development of Gloomhaven?
uh yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's definitely some like math behind the scenes in Gloomhaven, mostly in terms of like the monster counts for things. Like all monsters have a value, and so to put like this amount of value of monsters in a given scenario to sort of give it like an average difficulty. There's obviously a lot of math there, and like the numbers of attack values and move values, and sort of as you progress through levels you get more powerful cards with higher numbers. But really, like, you want to minimize the math that like the actual player sees on the end of it, right? You don't want them to have to say like, okay, well, I have an attack 4, and I have like this bonus and this bonus and this bonus, so I add 2 and subtract 1 and multiply by 2 and divide by 3 to get like the final value. And I think there's a bit of that in Gloomhaven, right? There are like various bonuses that you can get with your attacks and whatnot, but I try not to make it overly complicated.
Right, of course. And it isn't. I mean, like you said, the card system is absolutely fantastic. But again, as you were developing and stuff, and like you had the thought, you said you like Descent, you like Dungeon Crawl, you were thinking all this kind of stuff. Did it organically grow into this epic, like massively 17-pound box epic game, or was that your initial intent?
So yeah, there was definitely the initial intent there, but like it was more about just like what I wanted the game to be and what I wanted it to like to feel like, and less about like, yeah, I want to make like a giant box that no one will ever be able to lift. So and that, the size of the box just kind of grew organically out of what I wanted the game to be, which was just an epic experience that wasn't linear, right? Like you had this campaign that you could just kind of, there was more like just a big world that you could explore. Have all these different options for different quests that you can go on, and all these different plot threads you can explore, or just random side scenarios and whatnot. And that's kind of what I wanted to build. That was the idea. It was just like give players like a giant world that they could explore however they wanted to. And then from that sort of grew everything else. I mean, if you want a big open world, you're going to need like around 100 different scenarios to make it feel like that. And then if you've got 100 scenarios, people aren't going to want to play with the same character for over those 100 scenarios. So you need, lots of different characters and some way for them to like naturally progress from one character to another. So you develop like a retirement system. And then, you want to break up the action a bit. So, you got like in between scenario stuff like events and going back to town and leveling up and buying items. And, just like it became the giant world that I set out to make.
Right. So let me ask you about that then, because your initial game was Forge War, and it's sort of a box that a game that has four corners. And what I mean by that is it's not, as you just mentioned or alluded to, say an open world or an epic campaign. It's sort of, it begins and ends like a regular game, correct?
Yeah.
And Gloomhaven was intended to like continue and to grow. However, in the design process, is each campaign or scenario, like each one thing, is that designed as its own individual game first? And then do you have to weave it into the next? I mean, how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, the initial development of Gloomhaven was very much just focused on like that first single scenario. Where you've got 3 rooms, you've got some bandits and some skeletons, and you've got, initially it was just like the 4 starting characters. And it was, just like playing that over and over, making sure that works like as a game by itself. That it was fun, it was, tense, there were interesting decisions, and surprising at times, and all of that stuff. And then only once like that core game was where I wanted it to be did I then sort of start creating like a campaign on top of that, and developing new characters and new monsters and new scenarios.
Okay. And then, so I mean, I got a lot of questions about the game and all that kind of stuff too, but this is the one thing, like when it comes to, say, playtesting. Now, of course, the community of Board Game Geek, right? No matter what happens, the week after your game comes out, somebody's going to find something you missed or whatever. So how does that work when, like, you can only play test so much, right, before your game is published? However, once it's published and it goes out into the world, now you literally have thousands of people playing it thousands of times. So, of course, they're going to find things you missed. But how do you, before it gets published, sort of feel comfortable enough where you're like, okay, I have done this enough? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was certainly a big question with Gloomhaven, because there's so much to playtest. You've got so many different characters and so many different scenarios, and like, do you play every single scenario with every single character to make sure there's nothing wrong with anything? And of course, I didn't do that. I had to sort of trust this system that I had developed of scenario difficulty based on monster count, and sort of the idea that like each character is roughly equivalent to all the other characters. And just so each scenario was play tested, each character was play tested, but not like each character was play tested with each scenario. And then of course, I mean, the game comes out, and some characters are more powerful than others, some scenarios are harder than others, especially when you start combining those things. If I play this scenario with this character, it's like impossible, or not necessarily impossible, but just like really difficult. And I don't know, I kind of see it as a good thing, though. I mean, it's not a bad thing that now people are sort of exposing all the little flaws of your game, because then you have a chance to improve it, or just like improve the process for the next game, like Frosthaven.
Oh, of course.
So like after that first wave of Kickstarter came out, I started working on a second printing, and I did make a number of changes here and there to sort of balance out some of the powers. Maybe didn't do that in the best way, because then people were kind of upset that they got the first game and now their game was invalidated or something by
right
changes. But I think in the end, the game was better for it. I mean, it was
Oh,
better to do
absolutely.
that than to just leave things that you knew weren't quite balanced, for the 200 other thousand people that are going to get the game after
Of
you.
course, of course. Now, as far as like certain things in the game go, now you always hear say movie actors, right? When they take on a role, they say a person that actually lived, or whether it's made up, whatever role they take on, they go to the backstory, right? They go, what was it like as a kid growing up, and they really try to get into the character before they bring it to the screen or to the stage or whatever, to portray that character. Now, what I'm asking you about your characters is how much of a character story, individual character story, did you develop for each character? Like, did you have to sort of write an entire life history, have them evolve to put them in the game, or how is each character developed?
Well, one of the important things about the characters, is that they're not, like specific individuals. Like they're just like a character class, like a type of person in this world, like a fighter, as opposed to like, Grog the fighter, right? So yeah, I don't create like full backstories for them. I kind of leave that up to the player. And that's also like helped a little bit with the personal quests that each character gets when they're created. So that kind of gives you like a little bit of a backstory. But there was still like a lot of development, with the characters, just in terms of yeah, how I wanted them to feel when you were playing them. So I think a good example of that is the Cragheart, right? It was just like, this rock creature, who's kind of like cast out of his society for not, being adept enough at earth magic. And so he's just kind of goes off on his own, but he still does earth magic, but he's not like super good at it. So he might be hurting his party members a little bit by throwing rocks around. He's really strong. And so, it's kind of that feeling of being like this rogue, earth mage that, just throws big boulders around and tries to smash things with his fists. And, just trying to get like the feeling of that, like
Right, right.
within the actual abilities of the cards. It's really the most enjoyable part of designing the game for me, because
Characters?
you're able to like tie that thematic sort of creative side to like the technical, numbers crunching side of your brain, like tie them
Right.
both together to create these really interesting abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, in the whole game, like, and you said sort of, your inspiration came from sort of like Descent, and you like dungeon crawls and all this kind of stuff. So, was your initial intent to make sort of an RPG game sort of married with the Euro game concept as far as a card play, or did you purposely try to appease, say, sort of both audiences, or was there any thought in that of the initial design to make sure that it was either compatible, the two, appease the two audiences, or was there any thought in that aspect?
I'm not sure. I feel like I was just trying to appease myself. Like, I was
Okay.
trying to make the dungeon crawl game that I wanted to play, like exactly the game that I wanted to play. And that's all I really cared about. And I'm, just happy that other people wanted to play the same game that I
No,
did.
no, no, absolutely. But are you more of, like, you personally, are you more of, say, the Euro gamer? Like, I'm like
Yeah.
the dry Euros, or are you the RPG guy? And like, how did you, like, if you said of the game that you wanted to play, how did you make sure that your element was in it, but also you knew maybe the dungeon crawl and all the other stories, the RPG may not appeal to like the straight hardcore Euro players. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, no, yeah. Like when I sit down and play a board game, it's almost always, unless I'm playing Gloomhaven, going to be like, a dry, heavy Euro.
Right. Uh-huh.
That's definitely like what I gravitate towards. But like I said, like I also like grew up with D&D. I also have this creative side, that loves to role play, and so yeah. I mean, I guess part of the ideal game that I was trying to make was sort of marrying those two aspects, right? Like
Yeah.
getting that RPG aspect of it, and also like the more crunchy Euro sort of decision making process aspects, and getting both of those together.
Right, and the reason I'm asking and why I'm interested in that topic because I'm just like you. I'm the heavy, dry, Euro game as people call them, or whatever. That's what I just really like, really love. So to be perfectly honest, when somebody, my friend said, "Hey, let's go ahead and Gloomhaven," I'm like, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to do it." I didn't think it was going to be the kind of game I like because I don't do RPGs or dungeon crawls and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, "Yes, okay, I'll play," and I, totally gave myself up. I was an empty vessel. I went in totally clean and clear, and was, willing to commit fully. And I have to admit, I really enjoyed it. And I think the thing which you did mention before, which did appeal to me, was the card play. And how, the diminishing card play as well, and how you really had to think the strategic part of it. So I, as a dry Euro gamer, as we both said, really did appreciate that aspect of the game, and I loved it. I had a fantastic time. I thought it was really, really good. And have other people said sort of those same things to you about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and also like it's both sides of it, right? Like you have some people who will come out and say, well, it's not even a dungeon crawl. It's a Euro, pretending to be a dungeon crawl, which you can take as good or bad. But yeah, I mean, in some aspects, right, you can think of it as like a resource management game, right? These cards are your resources, and you've got to complete this objective before you run out of resources. I even like recently, like jokingly on Twitter, said something like, don't think of it like you're attacking that skeleton. Just think about like you're delivering, 4 spices to that skeleton, and once he's he's run out of hit points, he's sated, and his whatever his
Right.
delivery is complete, and so he'll leave the board.
As long as we're delivering something in the Mediterranean, right? Because that's
right.
That's the majority of our, yeah. But so that's interesting. That kind of brings me up to another point I wanted to discuss is now, since you were a gamer, right? And of course, we all know there are the people who quote unquote non-gamers, because I have a board game cafe, so all the time I'm just getting like people who know Monopoly, Sorry, Uno, things like that coming in play. But you then made Jaws of the Lion, which went into Target as sort of a mass market game. Now, this is, and I want to bring up Jaws of the Lion a little bit after this first question. But initially, was Gloomhaven, do you happen to know the percentages of the reception to just gamers, or were there many sort of outside gamers, those type of people who found Gloomhaven, or was the intent of Jaws and the Lion to find those? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to figure out the Jaws of the Lion and Gloomhaven.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Gloomhaven, like large majority, like I don't have like specific percentages, but was definitely sort of the more board game geek crowd, right? Those, initially those people familiar with Kickstarter who jumped in on the Kickstarter, and then after that, sort of, they flooded Board Game Geek with positive ratings, and then it started climbing, and then everyone else was like, oh, what's this? Let's try this out. Like it's, eventually like it's number one, like it's the number one game, so let's try it out. But really, I think you had to sort of be in that scene of going to Board Game Geek and checking the ratings and stuff like that to sort of be in the know to go out and decide you want to grab a copy of Gloomhaven, like this giant box. I don't think like somebody who just wanders in off the streets and into their local board game store and sees that box is going to be like, oh yeah, let's spend $140 on that, like without any sort of knowledge of what it is, right? But at the same time, like it had become so popular that it had sort of started bleeding into like the larger culture, where I would run into people on the street, or talk to people who had no background in board gaming, but I'd say that I designed this game called Gloomhaven. They'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, like, oh, my boyfriend like plays that every week or something, I hate you or something like that. And
Wow,
So
Isaac Childress, the enemy of relationships all over the world.
so yeah, so that was kind of the impetus behind Jaws of the Lion. It's like, okay, well,
Okay.
people are now like familiar with this property, but like this, this giant $140 box is just too intimidating for, your average board game player. And so we wanted to create a game that, didn't compromise in the quality of the game. Like it's still Gloomhaven, but it's a smaller box, smaller price point, easier to learn. Like the rule book isn't as intimidating. Setup is easier. Just trying to eliminate as many barriers as we could to sort of get that same core gameplay to like a larger, more mass market audience.
Right. So, and that also brings up an interesting point. Another question I wanted to talk about because you said we, right? We decided. Now, it's different talking to you because you are Gloomhaven, you are Cephalofair, you are your company, your everything. So when you say we, it's all you, right? You're not dictated by a publishing company or anything else. Is that correct?
Well, to a certain extent. So, I mean, it was just me for a long time. But now, yeah, I mean, I'm the president of, a company, Cephalofair Games, that has 4 employees at this point, including me. So I have my my operations and marketing vice president, Price Johnson, who's just, I don't know, the best sort of complement to my skills that I could have ever hoped for. So I mean, he's definitely like a cornerstone of this company at this point. He does all the stuff that I don't want to do, so I can just sit back and design games. And then we also have sort of a retail. I forget his title. Sorry, I'm being put on the spot. But yeah, we also have sort of a customer service, but he's sort of more than that. He's also helping with retail and conventions and stuff. And then we recently hired part-time a creative director. And so yeah, for a long time, like making Gloomhaven, it was all me, but then it sort of became overwhelming, like very overwhelming to sort of run the business of this game that has become massively successful and massively popular while
Right, right, right.
also designing games. So yeah, I've brought on additional people that have really helped out.
Right, because what I was wondering, and I guess I'm still sort of wondering because this is part of the question I was asking, like what came first, the chicken or the egg? So, and in that aspect, was it you as the company or Cephalofair that said, "Hey, we need to perhaps do this to reach a wider audience or a mass market," or were you say approached by Target to do this? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of both. I mean, yeah, like there were certain feelers being put out about, by targets and sort of target affiliates that, maybe maybe interested in this Gloomhaven thing. And, I start thinking about, well, how do we make Gloomhaven for a mass market? And sort of, yeah, that idea like germinated. And, when I, sort of came up with a good way on how to do that, then yeah, I approached them and pitched it to them, and they were receptive to that, and so that's what happened.
Okay, and now that it's been there, can you tell us a little bit about how the success has been as far as sales, and also how the success has been in just the average person walking down the aisle and being like, "Wow, that looks interesting. Let me pick that up." And now introducing them to Jaws of the Lion. And also, sort of in the same kind of vein, have there been a lot of people who say have bought that $140 game, as you mentioned, and were just so intimidated by it that they sort of went back, bought Jaws of the Lion to help them get introduced to the full Gloomhaven?
Yeah, I mean, I hear that on occasion. I mean, it's sort of hard to track, right? Like I don't like camp out in Target and watch the people go by and see who
No, of
grabs
course, right, right,
it.
right. I'm just wondering if that's what you've heard or has
Yeah.
Target told you, or have you get any data about that at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the sales have been great. Like I don't remember numbers off the top of my head, but like we're planning a third printing right now. Like the second printing is sort of getting into stores, and it's already, you know selling really well. And so yeah, I mean the reception has been like far better than I could have expected. And like Target's like super excited about it, and they just keep asking for more. So I mean, yeah, I couldn't be happier with that. But yeah, I think at least currently, like what I've heard from people is still more of people who are maybe a little deeper into the hobby than your average target audience, who are just really excited about the game because they felt like they were too intimidated by Gloomhaven, and so like, oh well, yeah, then this product is something I can definitely get behind, and try out. And then everyone who's tried it out, or at least the people who've reached out to me after they've tried out, which is sort of self-selecting your audience, but they've all like loved it and told me how much that they appreciate the system, and appreciate like all the changes that we made, like the scenario book, playing within the scenario book itself, and all those how much they've appreciated that and how much they love all that. So
Right,
so
right,
yeah, I
right.
mean, the reception has really just been like universally great, I think. I mean, yeah.
Oh no, and congratulations. No, that's very good. It's just one of those questions, I was always wondering because again, I think it's a great idea. It's phenomenal that you've done that and you're doing that because again, anything that can introduce more people into the hobby is just another fantastic thing, right? It's good for all of us. So I'd like to sort of segue into Frosthaven, and again, congratulations. That was the number one most funded, I guess you would say, board game on Kickstarter, surpassed Kingdom Death, which is phenomenal. But doing Frosthaven, at what point were you sort of urged into, or you decided that you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this again? How did that come about?
uh yeah, like directly after I finished Gloomhaven and finally like created all that content and sent it to the printers, and it was done. Yeah, I definitely wasn't ready to like turn around and do it again, right? But I sort of so I started designing another game, like a Euro game, Founders of Gloomhaven, which ended up coming out like the year afterwards. Um, but yeah, but then once that was done, I started thinking, oh, it might be nice to work on some Gloomhaven stuff again. It's a really fun system to play around with, and I mean, yeah, certainly you can get burned out on it, especially like when you're making such a large game. Um, and I think we're approaching that point with Frosthaven, and so I definitely won't be working on more Gloomhaven stuff for the time being once Frosthaven is done. But it's sort of like a cycle. Like I think I can make a Gloomhaven type product and then make something else and then go back and make another thing like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just it's enjoyable to me to
Right, right.
to
So,
create these systems and create these characters and these scenarios and stuff. So
okay, so now is Frosthaven going to be and I'm trying to really get this answer, and I'm sorry if I can't figure it out exactly the question I'm trying to ask, but is it going to be like a Gloomhaven, say 1.5, 2.0, something different? How many things and say the actual mechanics of play are different? Are people going to say, oh, this is the same thing with different characters? Like, how different is the whole experience of Frosthaven going to be compared to Gloomhaven?
yeah, I mean, you could call it like Gloomhaven 2.0 if you wanted. I mean, that's fairly accurate, and in the sense that like the core combat, right, is the same. But you're dealing with all new characters, all new monsters, all new scenarios, like just an entirely different campaign with a different plot and all of that. But then there also are like a lot of new things, a lot of refinements on different things. So like the in between scenario aspect is much larger, where you sort of go back to this town that you're building up, using like the resources you've collected in the scenarios, and sort of dealing with all that stuff. And there's it's yeah, so there's a lot added to that, and then there's also just like a lot of refinements like on the loot system, just in terms of like the resources that you get. And it's not just you collect money and you spend that on one thing to like buy new items or enhancements. So yeah, I just feel like the systems are like tied together a little bit more closely, and trying to think of like other refinements. There's like so many, but I can't think at the moment. But yeah, it's sort of like a 2.0. It's just like Gloomhaven evolved.
Okay. Now, also, this is just kind of I guess a nerd question for us gamers, right? And you'll know what I'm talking about because you're like the heavy Euro gamer too, and I'm sure you've come across this. And Gloomhaven itself is almost one of those. I'm not going to say almost. I think it kind of is one of those games that's sort of unplayable without an insert because there is so much stuff and it takes so much time. And I think you know what I'm talking about. With an insert, pull it out, pull it out, pull it out, boom, it cuts down that time. So
Yeah.
with the development of Frosthaven, and I know it's been a popular thing because I've just received a couple of like deluxe games, this and that, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in the gaming world with these inserts pre-made and stuff. So I'm sort of asking, imploring, whatever you want to say. Is that going to be considered for Frosthaven?
Yes, there. I mean, there will definitely be like more organization elements in the Frosthaven box than there were in Gloomhaven, which I mean didn't even have plastic bags. Um, so we'll give you plastic bags. We'll also give you a number of plastic trays that you can store the tokens and the overlay tiles in. And then there will sort of still be the insert that was in Gloomhaven that allows you to store all the card decks. It'll definitely be refined a little bit more to be a little easier to use.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. That'll be fantastic. That'll be well
So yeah,
appreciated.
I mean, it's not going to be as good as like a broken token insert or something,
Right.
because then the box would have to be significantly larger, which is not something that we're excited about, but it's big enough as it is. That was
Yes.
kind of the philosophy behind the original box. It's like how small can I make this box? And so yeah, we ended up, not sort of skimping on the organization aspects of it, which, in hindsight, maybe wasn't the best idea.
Oh, okay. And then when it comes to, because I know you credit even on your website, you have a whole team. You have illustrators, designers, artists, going on, in the whole development of this whole world and these projects. But when it comes to say a character, how much do you, or is it all you as far as the look of the character, or is it like you give somebody a description and they make it from that description? So how does that design go?
Yeah, it's a pretty collaborative process between myself and Alexander Elichev, who does all the artwork, or does all the character and the monster artwork. So yeah, I'll basically, I come up with a concept for the character, and sort of how it fits in the world, and I'll write up, a fairly basic description, and send it to him, and then he'll send me sort of a sketch based on that, and I make some suggestions, make some changes, and he goes back and creates a full artwork for it, and then I might make some other changes. So it's a back and forth process, to get something that looks cool from his eye, but then also matches sort of what my concept was.
Right. And how many? So is every single character is new in Frosthaven, or there more that continue? How much of Gloomhaven is going to say bleed into Frosthaven as far as any continuing stories, continuing characters, or anything like that?
Yeah, so the characters are entirely new. So we've got 17 new character classes. There are some repeated monsters. I don't remember the counts. Might be more like maybe like a third of the monsters are repeated from Gloomhaven, and then there's another 2/3 that are all new monsters and new bosses and stuff. For the most part, it's a self-contained story, but like if you've gotten to the end of Gloomhaven, also like there's going to be some tie-ins to Forgotten Circles, the Gloomhaven expansion as well. So if you've gotten to the end of those campaigns, then there will be some small thing that will tie over to the to Frosthaven as well. And there might be like small thematic callbacks like in the events and stuff like that. They'll little Easter eggs that you can look for.
Right. So now with these, and again, I'm sorry, like I said, I've only played just one campaign or scenario, as you call it, Gloomhaven. So I'm not familiar with the entire world of the game and everything. But when I asked you before about like a backstory of characters of you just said that they were a type, not necessarily an individual. So how much of the world or the characters in Gloomhaven were straight out of Isaac Childress's head, or were they already existing? You know what I mean? Like an orc already exists, a troll already exists, or even in Frosthaven, were any of these things brand new inventions of yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was all just straight out of my head. I mean, aside from humans who, are obviously not created by me, but yeah, all the other races, all the monsters and stuff were, yeah, just stuff that I created, just because I wanted to create like my own unique world, something that um, just felt, like a little different, like a little fresh. Wasn't just like, yeah, your standard orcs and elves and things like that.
Okay, and then I read that you got the name of your company wrong. Actually, you had heard it as Headless Ghost. So it's kind of a good transition into this, because the reason I was asking about the characters and your world and out of your head. So to name your company Headless Ghost, or a word that you thought was the correct term for Headless Ghost,
Yeah.
what is it that is part of, say, your hobby or your likes, to make your company that name, that helped you with this? Or what are some of your hobbies of, is why you would call your company the Headless Ghost?
I don't know if there's anything to read into there. It was just, yeah, I thought it was a cool word, but I didn't even really know, how to spell the word, so I spelled it wrong. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, oh, that's a really cool word. And, I started using it like as an ID for, like Board Game Geek and various other places. So when I, decided to make a company, it seems, like a logical thing. Like, let's just use that word. So it'd be Cephalofair Games. Um, I mean, there's a certain advantage though, to like having this sort of made up name, like as the name of your company. Cause like, when it's, you're Google searching or whatever, like it's the only thing that's going to come up. Um, so there's a certain advantage that like it's distinct, I guess.
Right, right, right. And also, because I know you said you've developed, of course, your first game was Forge War, and then you had the founders of Gloomhaven, and you are a heavy Euro gamer yourself. But, and I know, like, and I'm just trying to ask this question because I know, say, it happens to actors, right? Sometimes they get stereotyped or pegged into a certain type of character, and it's hard for them ever to get other roles. Do you think that's ever going to be a issue or a problem if sort of Cephalofair or Isaac Childress becomes too, sort of associated with Frosthaven? Do you think you can ever make a dry, soulless Euro? Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's certainly like already happened, right? Like I'm the Gloomhaven guy. And not many people at this point like know about Forge War. I mean, I think it's a great game. But I think I only ended up printing like maybe like 3,000 or 4,000 copies total. So like it's I don't know, maybe it's due for a reprint or something. But yeah, it's how it is. And I'm trying to break out of that, right? But I guess I wasn't super successful with Founders of Gloomhaven. That was overall like not received super well. But but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna continue designing Euro games. Um, I do think like Cephalofair Games, like as a company, is sort of intrinsically tied to Gloomhaven in the sense that like we'll probably only be releasing Gloomhaven or Gloomhaven like adjacent products. And then, so if I design a game that's totally outside that scope, for instance, like I've been working on this game sort of based on like my experience as a physics PhD for a long time, and so I've talked to other publishers about getting that published. It's not quite at the level though. I mean, it still needs a lot of playtesting, but I have a couple of publishers who are interested in it. So yeah, I mean, once I'm finished with Frosthaven, that's probably the next thing I'll be working on, and hopefully I'll get it to a place where it's really great, and people will like that, and then I won't just be the Gloomhaven guy. I don't know. We'll see.
I know, because that's what other designers do. I mean, a lot of them, because you wonder, like, even like, say, Uwe Rosenberg, right? He's got his own company, Lookout Spiel, I believe it is. But all of a sudden, he'll release a game with another company because,
Yeah.
like you say, maybe it's not, his type of game or whatever people are associated. So I can see that. So I wanted to ask you sort of like a personal question for, about you and your wife. Now, congratulations on the tremendous success of Gloomhaven and the Kickstarter Frosthaven. And I'm sure it's changed your life tremendously. So how have the both of you adapted? And I know, people say, oh, I'm not going to change, money's not going to change me or do whatever. But I mean, it does, right? I mean, if you're able to maybe afford a different type of car or do different kind of things, but how has life changed for the two of you because of your tremendous success?
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I feel like it hasn't actually changed a whole lot. Like, we still live in the same house. I still drive the same car. Yeah, there's a lot of money in the bank account, or in various investments and things. But yeah, I mean, I feel like my everyday life like hasn't changed that much. I'm still just making games and sitting in my office and doing that. I mean, there are some small changes. You feel like, oh, if I buy like this $5 pint of ice cream, I guess that's okay. Right?
Right.
It's not too
Yeah.
expensive. I could probably afford that. So
Yes.
so just like small things like that in your head. But also, like, my wife was able to I guess leave her job and go back to grad school. So she's sort of now pursuing her own creative pursuits, sort of working on a novel.
Oh,
She's
nice.
in a creative writing program at Purdue, and so that's been nice too, that she's had the freedom to do that, especially after, I spent so much time being dependent on her. Now she can have that freedom to do what she wants. So that's
That
really great.
That's fantastic, of course, because it's sort of well deserved on her part, right, for being that sort of backbone, that support system for you through this whole process. So it's nice that she can reap the rewards as well. Now, I want to ask you about your family per se, and what I mean by that is, as well as like, because I'm 57, so I'm older than you and I've been around a lot longer. But, 30, 40 years ago, the perception of a gamer or something was somebody who lived in their parents' basement, right? Like somebody who didn't have much of a life, this and all that kind of thing. But what does your family think of you as a professional gamer or professional game designer? Obviously, they see the financial rewards, but have they, just give you an example, I was talking to Alan Moon, and he said that his mother was at a yoga class or something, and one of the ladies said, oh yeah, I'm having people over, we're going to play Ticket to Ride, and she was like, oh, my son designed that game, oh, blah blah blah. That was so cool. So has your family sort of experienced your fame, your notoriety, and all that kind of stuff, and what do they feel about it?
Yeah, I think definitely for I don't know what I was trying to say, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, they're not heavy gamers at all. Like, I don't think, yeah, my parents have ever tried to play Gloomhaven or anything like that. Though I did like show it to my cousin and her friend and her husband, but and then they really enjoyed it. So I mean, certain members of my family have played it and they can appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, like my mother is like my biggest fan, which I think is often the case. So she's very excited, and yeah, basically anybody who listens, she'll tell them, how successful I am, and about Gloomhaven and how much everyone loves it, and she's constantly like cheering me on Twitter and stuff like that.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it's been really great, and I think they're just really happy and really proud of me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and again, that's fantastic. And it's great, again, your success, and it's wonderful that you achieved this. And I just want to if you could for a second, because everybody wants to be humble. They want to say, "Oh, I'm just lucky," this and that, blah blah blah. But I want you to just really sort of let aspiring designers know, let the audience know, let everybody know, like, the hard work. I just want you to just kind of really just say how many hours, how much sleepless nights, how much time, like all of the hard work that this really, really takes.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, it's hard to quantify. But yeah, it's like, especially sort of being my own boss and just working on this game. It's, or Gloomhaven or Frosthaven. At least hard. It for me, it's like hard to stop, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, I think it's the only way to create like something as giant as Gloomhaven. But like it's weekends, it's late nights. It's basically all the time, which sometimes my wife doesn't like that much. And yeah, like for instance, I mean, like Gloomhaven itself was like a year and a half of just like more than full-time work, like maybe like 60 hours a week, um, or more. Yeah, so I mean, it's not an easy job, but it's a super like fun and rewarding job. So yeah, like I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. But there are times when I'm frustrated, but also like I just love like sitting at my desk and making games. So
Yeah, and that's
good and bad.
fantastic. And it's good, like you said, that now, of course, because of your financial success, your wife is able to pursue more of her passions and dreams, write a novel and things like that. And then you as well. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but maybe has this opened up the door for, if you even were maybe considering a family, considering traveling, considering other pursuits? So has your success maybe opened more doors for you, just personally, that may not have been there before?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I say that like we live in the same house we've always lived, but we are considering moving someplace. We're probably going to do that like at the end of this year, but then with COVID, we might end up postponing that for a bit. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely, and we travel more, go to more conventions typically, which is a form of travel, and it's nice to be able to just head to Portugal, for LyriaCon if we want to go to Portugal.
Right, right.
That's really been quite nice. So yeah, it's definitely changed for the better, and I'm kind of it's also been more limiting in some respects, especially like with Frosthaven. Now I've kind of got like this deadline to get it done because of the Kickstarter. So I'm very much like looking forward to the point where Frosthaven is in the bag, and COVID is ideally behind us, and so then we can do a lot more traveling.
Yeah,
And
I think the whole world is with you on that one, Isaac. Yeah,
yeah.
we all want that behind us. Yeah. So, okay, so now about Frosthaven. So, real quick, I'm going to go ahead and bring this little banner up on the screen here. So, I want you real quick to talk about, because we're almost out of time. Yes, the deadline for Frosthaven, when it could be expected, the link that I'm showing up right here, what people can do about that. So, sort of do me a favor, and before we end, I'd like you to give me a big commercial about Frosthaven.
Sure, yeah. So that link is the link to the backer kit pre-order, which will still be open through the end of the year. I think we're going to close it down sometime in December. So yeah, if you somehow missed the Kickstarter but are interested, you can check that out and pre-order it. Or if that giant box is too intimidating for you, which I fully understand, you can go to Target and get Jaws of the Lion, which is sort of the intro to Gloomhaven that's really been engineered to streamline the process of getting new gamers sort of into that system. But Frosthaven itself, or any game in the line, is just like an epic campaign experience, where you get to play these characters and run around killing monsters. then it's really focused on decision making over randomness. So you really have to think through like how you're going to use the hand of cards that you have in order to best like get through the waves of monsters that you have to fight. So yeah, it's, I don't know, a lot of people love it. You might love it too.
No. Okay, yes, absolutely. So now, last but not least, because I think you might have left this out, is since we talked about before, Cephalofair is you. You are the CEO, president of the company. You're doing everything the Kickstarter, so you are 100% ultimately responsible. So when can I and everybody else expect Frosthaven to arrive on time?
So the current schedule, which we're trying very hard to make the final schedule, is we'll be done with getting the files to the printer around January, and then there's like Chinese New Year and all that. So with shipping and everything, we're ideally trying to get games to backers like late June, somewhere around June, or maybe early July. Yeah, I think the schedule was early July. And then ideally like a retail release probably a month after that. So like around Gen Con, if COVID is behind us and Gen Con actually happens. Sometime around then.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, go ahead, go on record. So as far as you're saying right now, and I understand, everybody understands things happen, but are you 100% sort of confident, as things go, because you have been through this before with Gloomhaven, the whole Kickstarter process and everything, but I understand COVID puts a wrinkle in things. But by Gen of 21, that people who have backed it can expect to have their copy?
I am, yes.
Okay, good. No, that's good, and thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, of course, again, things happen. I hope it doesn't.
Right. Like, I can't say I'm like 100% confident.
Right.
I'm very confident. Yes.
Good, very good. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. I really appreciate it. I learned an awful lot, and again, I just want to congratulate you on your tremendous success. And I don't have to congratulate you on Frosthaven success because you already have it. So, but anything you do in the future, I just wish you more and more success. And please continue to bring the world of gaming more and more of your tremendous product. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll do my best.
All right. Well, thank you, Isaac. And thank you, everybody, for joining us again for another episode of Meepleville Meets. As you see, we just had the wonderful Isaac, the designer of Gloom, Forge War, founders of Gloomhaven, and the upcoming Frosthaven, which we did put that link up. I'll put that again up for you real quick right there. So up in September, you still can go and be a late backer to get that if you haven't backed it already. But again, thank you for joining us for another episode of Meepleville Meets, and we'll see you on the next one.